All right, so I want to talk to you guys today about not really a common misconception, but something that you've probably heard a lot, and um, at I'm at fault to this too. I was saying this or kind of thought along this process several years ago, or thought that's just how it went until I dove more into it and learned that it's not the case for the majority of people. So what I'm talking about is understanding, the rate of loss from a percentage based approach. So when it comes to fat loss, most people are familiar with the commonly cited, I want you to lose zero point 0.5 to 1.5 pounds a week, 1 pound a week rule, right? And while this guideline, it can work for some, for the majority of folks, it's not feasible in both ways. It could be too fast, it could be too slow, and the main, it doesn't account for individual differences in things like body weight, body comp, any kind of your dieting history, which will affect your, a metabolic rate, things like that. And so, the more effective way, which is the way that I use to measure progress and get things going in the right direction, is by using a percentage based approach, specifically targeting a fat loss rate of zero point 0.5 to 1.0% of total body weight lost per week. Can you go higher? It depends on the person. It depends on what their goal is. If we're talking about um, a competitor trying to get down to a show, sure, going a little over that is acceptable for sure, right out the gate. But mainly for this topic, this call here, we're going to be more or less focused on not the competitor side of things, if that makes sense. So this approach is going to ensure that the fat loss is both sustainable and it's appropriate for the individual person's starting point. So number one, just right off the bat, why does this percentage base approach work better than the typical 1 pound a week kind of thing, right? So I'm going to be using an example during this call of a 250-pound male, just because it makes the math easy. But so number one, if we account for just individual differences, so if we look at a 250-pound individual, losing 1 pound a week represents only 0.4% of their total weight, which is a pretty doggone slow rate loss, right? If they're at 250 and they're wanting to get down to 150, that's if we're in a perfect world, in a vacuum, right? If we were to lose 1 pound a week for 100 weeks, if we went from 250 to 150, that would take 100 weeks over 2 years to get there, right? And that's way too slow. Um, Now, on the other hand, a 120-pound individual who loses 1 pound a week, that's going to push them toward that upper limit of 0.83, I think is the correct number, percentage of their body weight, which is a more aggressive approach. And typically, the smaller weight individuals are going to have not as much muscle mass on them to begin with. So you got to keep in mind muscle retention is big at that point. At that point too. So using this percentage based model ensures that the rate of loss that we're going for is proportional to the person's size and its starting point. So to catch Ren and Marcus up, what we're talking about is why should we use a percentage based approach when we're looking at rates of loss when it comes to fat loss instead of the typical, lose 1 pound a week thing. So we kind of just jumped into this. And so number two, this is going to prevent unnecessary aggressiveness on one end or going at a snail's pace on the other end. So that blanket, recommendation of 1 pound per week might push a smaller individual into too aggressive of a deficit, which again is going to increase, the risk of muscle loss, metabolic slowdown, and really just unsustainable eating habits. If you're a smaller individual, you're already eating a smaller amount of food, and you put that deficit up toward, the upper echelon, your food is going to be, really low. So again, unsustainable eating habits, that's never ideal, right? And now, if you're on the other end of it, kind of going back to the first example, if you're a 250-pound male, that 0.4% loss a week, which is a 1 pound a week, that is a snail's pace. That's going to take you forever. So again, it's just going to help prevent aggressiveness on one end and going at a snail's pace on the other. Now, if you're the quote unquote average person that would fit into this 1 pound a week model, then cool deal. This doesn't apply. But either way, your weight's going to fluctuate, one way or the other. So adopting this percentage based mindset is always the best route to go. And then, just kind of touching point on it again as far as maintaining the muscle mass. So as we all know, dieting too fast is going to lead to muscle loss, especially if protein intake and resistance training isn't prioritized, which for us, that's not really an issue. But for a lot of people, they just want to lose a ton of weight. Um, their first go-to is pulling out a bunch of food, right? In the gym is resistance training is always last on their mind. Okay, I'm going to pull a bunch of food. I'm going to go hop on the treadmill or the stairmaster at Planet Fitness and let's burn all these calories off, right? Resistance training is normally on the end of their list, and then I mean, just in an essence, the average person doesn't eat enough protein in a day in itself. So, but I say all this to say, staying within that 0.5 to 1.0% of your body weight, at a rate of loss per week, you're going to preserve better lean body mass and trying to maximize that fat loss. So you are, walking a fine line, right? But that's the way to do it instead of going to one extreme to the other, either too slow or too fast. Now, this is the cool part. I want to kind of show you how this looks like actually in practice, right? So just to give you an example, if you're a 150-pound individual, instead of that blanket 1 pound a week loss, that zero point 0.5 to 1.0 rate of loss, that would be 0.75 pounds lost to 1.5 a week. Then you go up to a 200-pound individual, 1 to 2 pounds per week. A 250-pound individual, 1.25 to 2.5 pounds per week. And then a 300-pound individual, 1.5 to 3 pounds a week. So again, you can all see how this changes, proportionally as you get heavier or, as you decrease in body weight. And now, here's the biggest kicker of them all. The rule of thumb here is to make sure that that deficit doesn't go over 30% of your starting point. So, for example, a 250-pound male, let's just put him at the upper echelon to make the math easy. Let's shoot for a 1% rate of loss. So, if you do the math on that, 1% of 250 is 2.5 pounds a week, right? That's what we're looking for. Now, you guys probably should all know, if you don't know, to lose 1 pound of fat across a 7 day span, you need 3,500 calorie reduction, right? So if we're shooting for a 2.5 pound drop per day across a 7 day span, we just times that 2.5 pounds times 3,500. That's going to give you 8,750, right? So 8,750 calories across a 7 day span is what you need to deduct to get to that 2.5 pounds rate of loss if you're that 250-pound male trying to hit that 1% rate of loss, right? Hope you guys are still following me. I try to make the math easy here. So across that whole 7 days, we need to burn that additional 8,750 calories, right? We divide that by 7 to make the math even easier, and you have a daily deficit of 1,250. So to make the math easy again, if we're eating at 5,000 calories a day, right? And we're going to have to find a way to get a daily deficit of 1,250, whether that comes from cardio, steps, food, a mix of two of them, a mix of all three, whatever. Um, that's fine. We just have to make sure that, again, that we're staying underneath that 30% upper limit, right? So the easiest way to do that is take your daily deficit, divide it by your current intake of food. 1,250 divided by 5,000 gives you a 25% rate of loss. So that is well within range. That's under the 30% range, right? If you were to, well, let me back up. And so this is one of the big reasons for me, for a lot of people when they come on, they aren't eating enough, right? So let's just say if you come in here and you were trying to do, and you were only eating 3,000 calories a day instead of 5,000, right? If we take that and divide that, that's a 42% percent rate of loss, right? That's way too high. So that's one big reason why when people come in, the majority of the times they aren't eating enough. We have to get that number higher to make sure that that initial deficit isn't too aggressive, which again would turn into, losing too much lean mass, the metabolism slowing down, and just unsustainable results, right? Is everybody following me there? Okay. Um, And then, yeah, Jay, for sure, you last summer, absolutely. You got to make sure that you have enough food in your system for your body to perform. It's just you got to have that higher limit when you start out. You would rather start out a diet at 5,000 calories than 2,000. There's so much more room here to work, right? Where if you start at 2,000, you just got a little bit, right? You start at five, you got a ton of room to work with here. And then obviously, we all know why slower fat loss can be more beneficial. It might not be the funnest thing in the world, but, and I don't want to sound brash or rude or whatever the case may be, but a lot of people think, yeah, I need 30, 40, 50 pounds to lose. Cool deal. That's awesome. It's not going to happen in 3, 4 months, right? It might take you a while to build your calories up and then start to deficit. Um, I mean, I even had an individual call me rude and an asshole at one time because the guy was like, hey, I want this a little bit faster. I'm like, look, man, you're 36 years old. You've been eating like crap your entire life. This 6 month thing of what we're trying to do initially is not going to fix 36 years of neglect within 6 months, right? It's going to take you a little while to get there, but once you get there, it makes dieting a heck of a lot easier. Um, and again, just doing it at a slower pace doesn't mean that we want it to be at a snail's pace, but we don't want it to be too fast again, for the opposite effects, but just better adherence. If it's at a moderate rate, you're going to adhere to the diet better. Obviously, excuse me, a reduced risk of that metabolism slowing down once you start to do that. I mean, if your deficit is too aggressive just off the rip, you're going to be back at maintenance within 4 to 6, maybe even 8 weeks. Maybe at some point you're going to plateau and you're going to plateau hard. Then you got to come back up, and how long does that take? Who knows? It just depends on how your body responds. So if you take it more of a slower approach, you can have that trajectory go down a lot farther than where if you're like, okay, let's just jump off the cliff and just go straight down. Okay, cool, that's fine, but you're going to have to come back up at some point, and at some point is going to be rather quickly as compared to the lower, slower approach, right? And then just on the back end of all of this, sustainable habits. I mean, jumping off the cliff, in reference to calories, right? That's not sustainable to anybody. It's not fun, nor is it sustainable, and you're going to be a heck of a lot more prone to stray off the diet, not do your cardio, just not do what you're supposed to do. So again, just sticking to that. Moderate to I don't even want to say slow. I don't want to say average either, but just not too aggressive and not too slow, right? Just a good mix of the two is the best place to be. And now, all this being said, you have to make sure that it's based on the individual, right? If you're an individual with more body fat, you're a beginner, or if you're in the earlier stages of your diet, you can go upwards, to that upper echelon of 1.0. I've even pushed some guys to a 1.5%, rate of loss a week for the first 1 or 2 weeks, and then I'll pull them back, just to kind of, get things going in the right direction. If I start somebody at, let's just say if it's at one, right, and 2, 3 weeks go by and nothing changes, they're perfect, they're nailing everything. Okay, cool. I'm gonna put them to 1.5. That's gonna get them over the hump. Once they get going, I'll pull them back a little bit, and that trajectory is gonna keep going. Now, if you're already a leaner individual, and you're really trying to maintain as much muscle mass as possible, and just trying to keep your performance up in the gym, obviously staying closer to the zero point 0.5 end is going to be a lot more beneficial to you, just to make sure that we're not going too far on the deep end, and causing catabolism when it comes to muscle retention. So, out of all that, that's being said, it's just best to just stay away from the 1 pound per week mindset. That kind of gets in some people's heads. If a 250-pound individual, has a buddy who's a female friend that's 130 and she's losing a pound a week, she's happy, she's feeling great, she's looking good, but this individual is only losing a pound a week. Well, for sure, his progress is not the same as hers because I mean, hers is exponentially better, almost double of what his is. His is a heck of a lot slower. Hers is a heck of a lot faster, and it's all dependent on that percentage-based model. So again, don't get caught up in that. Oh, well, I need to lose 1 pound a week, kind of thing. Nope. It could be more aggressive than that. It could be even, again, depending on the person, it could be a little less. But you just got to find that initial groove. Um, and just kind of go from there. I think, not to pick on Ren, but I think at some points, when me and Ren are like, we're really clicking and the diet's rolling and things are moving in the right direction, there'll be some weeks to where he's down 3 to 4 or 5 pounds in a week. I mean, it's a big jump. Now, if that was Jacob, who's not as tall nor as heavy as Ren is, I'd be like, Jacob, what are you doing? Or like, 5 pounds a week for you is significant. For Ren, it's not that far off just because of the weight difference, body composition, different things like that. So again, you just got to stay in your own lane. I guess is the best way to put it. So, but outside of that, anybody got any questions or anything? And yeah, Ren, yeah, that is one bad meal for you. Yours will jump in a heartbeat for sure.
Sadly, it always goes in that direction. But yeah, I'll have some good news for you tomorrow.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Anybody got anything else to add? Anything?
I'm just curious to know if, well, for one, all the math, I could have used a marker board at that point, but
I know. I know. I know. I know.
um, no. So would that, is there like a similar formula as well for like, because you talk about the percentage of loss, is there kind of like a similar thing for gain as well?
Yep.
Uh,
Yep. It's kind of the same. It's just the opposite direction, but a lot of that is dependent on, well, I think that's more dependent on body comp a lot more too. Because then in essence, if you're going the other way and the scale's going down, but your gym performance is still up, at a pretty high clip, then we can pretty probably confidently say that, hey, we are shedding some body fat, right? But if you're going up in weight and the gym performance isn't matching, I guess is the best way to put it. Or if the body comp isn't keeping up to par with the weight gain that we're seeing, then we're probably adding on a little more fat than we want to add, right? And initially, on the other side of it, we're looking for fat loss. And here, I guess on the other side of it, it's more or less muscle gain, but we all know that it's heck of a lot harder to add on a bunch of tissue than it is to lose a bunch of fat. So, and that's going to differ in between enhanced individuals and natural individuals. But I'm not going to say it's the exact same, but there is a way to kind of dictate that to go up in an essence. The biggest thing is you don't want to make too big of a jump, um, and just right out of the gate see a ton of gain just initially. Kind of like if you right out of the gate pull 2,000 calories out of your 4,000 calorie, daily deficit, that's a 50% jump, right? If you add in 50% of what you're eating now, which is like, like 4,000 ish calories or somewhere in there. If you was to add another 2,000 in daily, you'd be fat by next week. I mean, you would definitely have a ton of extra, visible fat on your body. So again, it just kind of all plays into the body comp is going to be kind of I'm not gonna say the end all be all, but it's definitely a lot more important to me when you're trying to add on size. So, Jay or James, y'all got anything to add?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that wraps up for today. Have you already done a call on the whole 7 day diet thing? What are you talking about? 7 day diet?
So I saw you make a post recently saying like a lot of coaches think that essentially your weight of loss or weight of gain is just based on a 7 day window. And then like I've heard comments about like if you're dieting hard, don't go crazy on the weekend and ruin the week's progress.
Hmm. Um, so I guess are you talking about like how would that how would that play into that as well too?
Right.
Well, I guess it comes down to kind of what your goal is, I guess. I mean, now granted, this rate of loss equation, I guess is the best way to put it, is to me is to get somebody going in the right direction. Now, if they stick to it perfectly, then yeah, they're gonna see that they should see that percentage loss, right? But if they go a little too crazy on the weekends, let's say if we have them at a 1.2%, rate of loss, right? Well, if they eat out on the weekend, they eat crappy, they eat bad, that 1.2 could go down to a zero point 0.4. And then at that point, that's a snail's pace, right? So again, I think it kind of pertains to how adherent that you are to the actual plan. And then if you're on the other side, a much leaner individual who's in like a contest prep or something, I mean, that whole 7 day thing is just out the window. I mean, at that point, it's day to day. Kind of, what the adjustments might need to be, just depending on the day and what you had the previous day and things like that. So, if that answers your question, Jay.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, cool deal. If nobody else has got any more questions, we'll wrapping up, and I'm gonna go knock out some more check-ins. So outside of that, I hope you guys have a good day. If you got any questions at all, just shoot one my way. And I appreciate you guys showing up. See
There,
ya.
guys.
Bye, y'all.
Yeah.